That's one way and two way. Style binding is dynamically applying inline styles, and class binding is dynamically applying CSS classes. So now another important you have to know about event binding. Event binding in React, how it works. Generally, this is not a topic of learning in React because these already JavaScript teaches you everything. Events means anywhere when you see React related tutorials and all, you will not find much about events because usually people who have idea on events in JavaScript, the same works in React. So nobody wants or tries to explain about events because already what you learned in JavaScript same applies here. Few changes I will explain how they work, but I will give an overview of what is it completely, how it is little different from JavaScript events. We'll see that. So technically, first point, what is event and how this event works? Usually, how you define event? Event is a message sent by sender to its subscriber in order to notify the change. So technically, event is a message sent by sender to its subscriber in order to notify the change. That is the technical definition for event. So what is sender? What is subscriber? We will see one small concept here. Actually, suppose in JavaScript you have seen you return a function. This function is some insert click, and here you have a button. You generally write on click. On click is what? Insert click. Like this we write. Usually when anyone looks at this syntax, what they think about this is there is a function called insert click, and we are calling this function on button click. That's what generally people think, which is not. So you are not calling a function here. What exactly happening here is there is a function insert click. On button click, it is pointing towards the function. That means we are not calling the function. It is pointing towards the function. It is a function pointer. In programming technologies, we call it as function pointer, or usually it is called as a delegate mechanism. Delegate is a function pointer mechanism. So events are not calling the function. Events are pointing towards the function. So this is called subscriber, and this is called sender. So sender sends a notification to subscriber, and subscriber will perform the functionality. So in software programming technologies, wherever events are used, there you will have a sender and a subscriber. Any technology, either it is Java, .NET, PHP, anywhere. So every event uses the mechanism of function pointer delegate. Sender sends a message and notifies the subscriber, and subscriber performs the functionality. Subscriber means here subscriber means it contains the actions to perform. What actions to be performed? That is defined by subscriber. When to perform? Sender will notify. Sender sends a notification and tells when to do that. So event follows a sender subscriber relation actually. So here I will give a simple syntactical here function, some insert click, and we generally call this as subscriber. And on click, insert click, this is a sender. So subscriber comprises of the actions to perform. Subscriber comprises of the actions to perform. Sender triggers a notification. Sender triggers a notification. And invokes the actions defined in subscriber, defined by subscriber. So event follows a communication pattern called, we call it as observer. Event follows a communication pattern called observer. In software design patterns, event is under the category of communication patterns. We call behavioral patterns. In the behavioral patterns, it is referred as an observer pattern. So you generally know software development in real world environment always follows some design patterns. And there are 23 design patterns. We call them as Gang of Four, GOF, Gang of Four design pattern. Every software is built by following certain design patterns. So all the design patterns are derived from 23. We call them Gang of Four. Creational, structural, behavioral patterns will be there. So this comes under communication pattern. We call it as observer. It is a communication pattern. Actually, it comes under the category of behavioral patterns. It comes under behavioral patterns. So event follows a communication pattern called observer. It's a behavioral pattern. Actually, event uses delegate mechanism. Delegate mechanism. Delegate mechanism is nothing but, so which is a function pointer mechanism, which is a function pointer. Delegate means function pointer. So you are not calling the function, you are pointing towards the function. Right. Currently, we are learning about events in function components. Actually, events in a class components also little different from function. We will discuss about both of them, how they work in class component and in function component. So why we say delegate mechanism, just one basic example I will show you. Let's take a simple HTML page for example sake. This is a simple HTML page. So in this HTML page, so we have a button. So insert and button on click. We are using insert click. We are using insert. Now we will run this here. You see in the design here, there is a button called insert click. There is a button called insert. So is there any function by name insert click? There is no function by name insert click. Then it should show error. It should display error saying that not found, insert not found. Because how you are using any event which is not at all there, any function which is not at all there. Let's go to the console here. In the inspect, so we see in the console we don't have any error. That means if there is no function and you are calling it, it should show some reference error, but it is not showing any reference error. Now see, when we click on insert, then it tries to point towards that function. Now the function is not available, then it shows a reference error. So you are not calling the function, you are pointing towards the function. So it is, event is not calling the functions, it is pointing towards the function. So that means we are pointing towards the function and the function executes. So sender sends a message to the subscriber and subscriber performs the action. This pointing a function is technically called as delegate. Delegate means in other languages people call as function pointers, function pointer, reference. So the reference where that particular functionality is defined, we have to do that. So this is generally the concept of event, how the event works. So event uses a delegate mechanism and we call this as function pointer. Okay. So this is first thing, how, what is event and how it is configured. What are the interview points here is, in experience level interviews, they may ask, what is the design pattern followed by event? Event follows a design pattern called observer. Because asking about design patterns related to a concept is very experience level question. In interviews for experienced people, they ask about which design pattern it uses. What is the architecture behind that particular functionality? So that means for a fresher, they will ask what is event. For experienced people, they ask which design pattern it follows. So what is the mechanism behind it? So it uses a delegate mechanism, right? Now, this is basic point. Here, when you are working with events, you need to know about another point. That is, here we have a option, event handler. Event handler. You need to know about event handler. So every event is configured with a handler. Every event is configured with a handler. So actually on click, what is it? On click is event. On click, insert click. So on click, which functionality it is performing, this is called event handler. We have event and we have event handlers. So this is event and this is event handler. That means if anyone asks what is the event, we say on, click on, change on, blur. These are events. Which event handler it is using means on click, what is the functionality it is performing. So every event have event handler. Actually, React event handler. So React event handler can be defined in various techniques. Can be defined using various techniques. So generally, React event handler can be defined using various techniques. How React event handler is defined? Because in JavaScript, how event handler is given, I given above. That means in JavaScript, usually your event handler will be like this. Now, how React event handler can be defined? So how it works? Actually, in React event handler, suppose you have a button. You have a button and on click, it uses a dynamic expression. In that we should point, insert, click. That's how we define. This is one technique. That's how you configure. That means usually when you write a function, that means here you're defining a event name, function name, insert, click. And here you are defining a parenthesis. What is this means? It means the memory is allocated for the function. That means when you click, the memory is allocated for the function and the functionality will be performed. That is the reason you saw in our previous error here. It is not showing error. So because the memory is allocated when you click. When you click, the memory is allocated for the function and the functionality will be performed in that memory. But what happens in React is usually React allocates memory for the function at the time of loading the component itself. Because in React, what you done, you return some function here. In a component, you return some function. Now, at the time of creating the component, these functions are also loaded into memory. That means they will not load when you click. They are already loaded into memory. Now, on click, what you have to do? Just point towards the memory. No need to allocate the memory. Right? What is an empty parenthesis means? Actually, it represents a constructor. It represents a constructor. Constructor allocates memory for that particular object to perform all the functionality. But here it is already loaded. So you just need to point. You just need to point towards it. So that means you don't need to allocate memory. You just need to point towards the memory. That's the reason you don't need to write insert click like this. Just you need to define insert click. That's the function, right? There is another technique here. Usually when you configure like this. You can also define on click, on click. And when you write a function, here you can define a functionality which returns some function. That means you can configure the functionality in this way. You can define the functionality like this. That means you can write here insert click. What does this means? For example, I will show you here. Yeah, I will create a new component. Let's add a new component here, event demo. So event demo.jsx and export function event demo. Okay, so it will return a simple container fluid. Yeah, and here we are adding just a button insert. So write a function insert click. Okay, now I just keep an alert. So insert clicked. That's the functionality it should perform. Let's keep this in startup event demo. Okay, so let's run this and see. Now it is fine. Now this is insert. Okay, refresh. Now when I click on this insert, it should fire up. So how do we define? So on click is we have to point towards insert click. You don't need a parenthesis here. So because already memory is allocated, the functionality is loaded, but it will execute only when you click. That means this is the sender and this is the subscriber. Right now I will click on this. So it is going to perform the functionality insert click. Now here, this insert click can be defined in this way. You see, it is a function. So it can be defined in this way. That means you have to write an event and we need to pass. So here, what it is, insert click. That's how we are configuring. Another option is like this. We are defining in this way. That means we are configuring in that way. And insert click, it's also working. Now, what is the necessity of this? Why you need this? Already the memory is allocated. Again, why you are initializing the memory? Why you are initializing the memory and returning this memory? Actually, what this syntax means, it is a function which is returning this functionality. This implies indicates return. It is returning that particular functionality. That means it is returning a function called insert click. Why you are returning an insert click function? What is the necessity of returning that function? So into this insert click, suppose I am passing some data, some value I am passing, and I am trying to collect this here. So that means some name I am trying to collect it, and I want to print that here. That means the name, whatever is passed into that. So you see here, when we click on this, when you click on this, the name is collected. So what is the advantage of configuring and initializing a new memory so that you can pass some data? You initialize the memory again and return that new memory. That means you can pass your own data into it. Custom arguments. you can pass the custom arguments. So that means if you are not passing custom arguments, if you are not passing the custom arguments, see here, I am defining this name and trying to access that name. See, it says it is undefined. That means it is not passing any data. There is no name configured into it. Now here, for example, I am passing an event. I am passing an event. Oh, sorry, this is, yeah, just event. And you see there is no event. Usually you do this in your JavaScript. You pass event arguments. There are two event arguments. Na? One is this, another one is event. Actually, what is the intention? Because generally event arguments are passed without this also. Without this, how event arguments will be passed? We can collect the event arguments and use them. I will show you that point also. That means without doing this, simply insert click can pass event arguments. This name is now an object, am I right? It is an object. Which object it is? Event object. Event object means what? You can collect the object related details and event related details. How to collect object related details? Suppose button have an ID. What is that ID? Some btn insert. You want to collect that ID. How you can collect? Name dot target dot what? ID. So it is going to access that ID and show. That means actually what is the point about first one? What is the point about second one? The first syntax that you have defined, it will pass the default arguments. Default argument is an event argument through which you can collect object related details, event related details. You can collect two details, object or event. But the second syntax allows you to pass custom arguments. You can pass your own arguments. In the above syntax, there is no chance of custom arguments. What is the specialty about JavaScript? It allows both. You can pass default arguments, you can pass custom arguments. Actually, in JavaScript, see, where is your JavaScript file here? Yeah. In JavaScript, what you can do, suppose you are writing a script and we have a function called insert click. In JavaScript, what you can do, you can pass this, you can pass event, and you can pass your custom values also. But in React, it is not possible. That means in JavaScript, you can pass all these three. In React, what happens? These two are by default passed. But if you want your own arguments, then you have to create a function, return the function, then you can pass your own arguments. That means when to use this syntax. Second one, when you are trying to pass some arguments into the event. If you want any custom arguments into the event, you have to follow this, right? So the concept I will give here. So the function pointer like insert click can pass default event argument that sends information about event and object. That sends information about event and object. That means usually you have function insert click e dot target dot id name class name like that value etc. E dot client X, client Y, key code, shift key, control key, like this. Event related details you can directly access. On click, insert click. This will send default arguments, that is through function pointer. If you want to access object related details, you can access by using target. e.target.id, target.name, target.class name, value, and all these things. So what about second one? The second one is going to send custom arguments. Here you cannot pass any custom arguments. Then how do we pass custom arguments? So the function return, how it is, insert click. This is the function return. The function return allows to pass custom arguments. The function return allows to pass custom arguments. And you can pass any type of argument. That means it can be a primitive type or it can be a non-primitive. That means number, boolean, string, or array, object, anything. That means you are initializing the memory for that particular function again, and into that memory you are passing some custom arguments so that it can access those custom arguments and use them. We'll see. So now here the default argument, this is the custom argument we are passing. That means this is the default arguments. Custom arguments means you need to configure in this way. So what is the syntax? We have a function, insert click, and we have a reference. Into the reference we can pass anything. Button, on click, insert click. Sorry, this is a function. Insert click and some value, any value. You can configure any value. configuring any value. That means it's a string or an object, any type array, any type of value you can pass here. You can pass into this. So here we are configuring like function. So insert click. On insert click, here we are defining some value. Suppose it is an array. So we are passing some array. And here we are collecting some cities. And we are just accessing the cities. Like this we are displaying. That means on insert click here, it should access those and display whatever the type of data you are passing. So this is the arguments that you want to pass into this. Now remember, these are allocated into the memory. For example, if I pass here E, that's an event argument here. That means the function is having a formal event argument. It is having a formal event argument. This is a formal argument. So that means this you can observe, it is showing some option, button element and mouse event. The parameter E refers to button element and mouse event. Mouse event. That means now, for example, how you define them, how you handle them. That means what does this E refers to? E refers to button element and mouse event. What does it means? It is an argument which contains element related details, event related details. Earlier in JavaScript, element related details you send by using this. Object related details you send by using this. Event related details you send by event. So now this event is having that. Now how do you collect it? That means you just imagine this as function. Function have a event. Am I right? This is formal parameter. And this is the function definition. Na? This is the function definition. Na? It is the function definition. That means this is the function definition. Now this value contains object related details, event related details. How you will use them here? So suppose here I am writing a comma and say E dot target dot I am giving ID. That means we are sending one more parameter. This is comma, I am accessing an ID. This ID I will print here. That means I will put here what it is. First is cities. I'll just print here cities /n. Next line, I want to print the ID. Print the ID. That means now what happening here is you click, it is going to send both details, the custom arguments as well as default. That means if you want to send the custom arguments and default arguments both, then so this function can take an event argument. Remember, it cannot take anything else. It can take only one event argument. It cannot use anything else. That means you cannot configure multiple here. So multiple here. It will allow only one. It is going to allow only one. And that contains both element related details as well as event related details. These you can send into the event where you can collect and use them. So if there is a point like I need to send my custom arguments along with default arguments, then you have to follow this syntax. The custom arguments and default arguments, both you can send, which is not possible earlier. Earlier you can pass only default. That means the above syntax you saw. Here you can collect only one. What is it? Default. Here default arguments only you can access. Default arguments means target ID and client text details. But in the second syntax, you can send both, right? So the function return also allows to pass the default arguments along with custom arguments. Default arguments along with custom arguments. Along with custom arguments. Along with the custom arguments. So how this is possible? Default and custom arguments, right? So this is nothing but usually what happens. So we configure in this way. So function insert click, in that some custom and e. So how do we define? On click, so you can pass an e. Here into this you can pass custom value e dot target dot, or you can send complete e. If you send what refers complete event object, which contains both object related details as well as event related details. So e dot target dot id, name, class name, like this you can access. E dot client x, client y, key code, like this. Those you can access. Mm-hmm. Any name, that is formal parameter. No? Formal parameter don't have any reserved names, right? You know, that is a function formal parameter, right? A formal parameter name can be anything, x, y, z, doesn't matter, right? So you have a function name, whatever you pass here is formal, and formal name can be anything, any name it can be, but it refers to event. Name can be anything, but the parameter that you pass, it refers to event. You can give any name, right? E is not a reserved name. E is our just reference name. We can use any name here. So that name contains event details and object details. The formal name can be anything. You can give any name. So E is not any reserved word in any React or JavaScript. That's a just traditional way of representing that we are using event arguments. Actually, Anything you give XYZ, it refers to event only, right? You can give any name, doesn't matter. These formal names in function can be anything, right? So that is basically how the event arguments are passed. How to configure the event and how do we pass the event arguments, right? So you have seen event handler. Event handler is configured with, it is configured with events, right? Now it has event, it have event arguments. So I hope you are clear in this. Means how to pass custom arguments, how to pass default arguments. If there is only default arguments, then you can just point towards the function. You don't need to allocate any memory. If there is custom argument to be passed, then you need to use this mechanism. Right? I'll just copy this example as a rough example for that syntactically. Yeah? This is event binding .jsx actually. Okay, fine. Event demo. Okay, this is the two basic things you learned. One is event, another one is event handler, event handlers. Next important you should know here. Generally, events, for example, we have on click. It is related to which element? So events are not related to any element. All events are derived from browser. All events are browser events. They are not element events, button events, text box events, because some websites tutorials mention button events or keyboard events like that. So people have misunderstanding about that. Like button have some events, keyboard have some events. No, events are related to browser. On click means you can use it even for a div or a span also. On click is used for any element. So only the point here is actually, so all events are configured by JavaScript window object. All events are configured by JavaScript window object. They are a part of window. So hence they are referred as browser events. They are referred as browser events. We call them as browser events. So this is BOM, that is browser object model. But React cannot use these events. React cannot use the browser events because React is not using the actual DOM. So React uses a library called synthetic events. It uses a library called synthetic events. React uses a library called synthetic events, which map to browser events, React uses synthetic events library. These will map to the browser events because directly React cannot use browser events. So synthetic events, these are related to virtual DOM. We call them as virtual DOM events. And browser events are DOM events. Synthetic events are related to virtual DOM. These are related to browser. So the browser events are the events understandable to browser, but React cannot use them directly. It will take help of synthetic events. Remember, all front-end technologies which are not JavaScript but using JavaScript, they use a extra library. By using that library, they can interact with JavaScript events, browser events. Because browser events can be handled only by JavaScript. Only JavaScript can handle browser events. Any other technology, React or Angular or any other technology is using events, means they are not JavaScript events. They are some library of events configured which map to JavaScript events. Right? That is the point. Because browser events can be handled only through JavaScript. Only JavaScript can manage those events. Even jQuery also uses click change like events. They are translated into browser events. Browser events. So browser can understand only browser events, right? Which need to be translated into synthetic. You can see here actually. Suppose currently I'm using this event handler, mouse event handler. As a developer, if you want to know how this is built, right, you can right click and go to definition. Go to definition, it will take to the definition from where it is actually coming. So it is having like this. Right click, go to definition. So this is target now. Go to definition. You see target is coming from synthetic event.
कॉलेज से ला के दिया था रखेला भूल
It
गए
is a base synthetic event.
पापा जी से हम तो तुम्हें
Base
ला के दिया
synthetic
था
event. From there, this target is coming.
काहे दिए
Target and all these are defined here. That's the synthetic event. That means usually this is the event. It is handling those events. So it is not directly event. This is the synthetic event. And this synthetic event contains all the details actually. Synthetic event contains all these functionalities. All the functionalities are defined inside synthetic event. So that means actually they are derived from general event only, but not browser event like all features available here, limited. JavaScript browser event have a lot of things. React is using few. React is using some few basic events related or properties. So target is a event related property and it is derived from synthetic event. Any event like mouse events, anything is derived from this location only. See on click, I'm right click on click and I go to definition. You see on click is a mouse event handler. That means on click is a mouse event handler. It is a mouse event handler. Okay, that means it is of what type? Mouse event handler type. Right click and go to definition. Mouse event handler is an event handler. Am I right? It is derived from event handler. It is of type event handler. Now right click on event handler, go to definition. Event handler is extending synthetic event. Event handler is extending synthetic event.
जाओ तो से
What is meant by extending?
ओ
You already know classes inheritance, right? In JavaScript, a
क्या खेल रहे
class
हैं
extends another
क्या हुआ
class. That means this is the super class. Am I right? This is the derived class. Derived class. So this synthetic event is the event. This synthetic event is the event. It extends base synthetic event. That base synthetic event is going to actually map to the browser. This is not shown to you because even developer have a restriction limits that he cannot explore everything, the architecture behind it. Otherwise, it leads to hacking. Means it's not secure. That's the reason up to certain limit, they will stop you. That this is okay. Now, how it maps to the browser events internally, it does. That you cannot see, you cannot examine that. But you will stop here because if I right click and say go to definition, then again it comes back to the same. From here you cannot go. So up to certain levels they will stop. So that developer need to understand, because see, you are a developer, you are learning a technology. We deliver you some topics. These are not only the topics that technology is having, because technology is having hundreds, thousands of options. If we start explaining everything, every technology, you have to learn 1 year, 2 years. Usually every technology, what do you think people learn Java means? 3-4 months Java entire enough? No, it takes 3-4 years to know about Java if they have to explore it. That means so many features are there, options are there. If you open a class in a Java or .NET, it contains thousands of options. Out of that, you will learn only few, which are regularly used by you. But in some rare projects, you need to come across with certain functionality, which you haven't learned. Usually it will happen. In that case, you should be able to explore by yourself and see what it is. Then you have to know about all these mechanisms. That means from where it is derived, what is its base. Generally, an experienced developer, when he sees the architecture behind, he can easily understand, he knows how to use it. Because he see that it is a class, then he know how to use a class. He will create an object. Through that object, he can access the members and he can use. So that means if you go to the definition, you will understand the structure. Have you observed interesting concept is when we go to the definition, we are using JavaScript, but the library of React is built in TypeScript. The complete library of React is built in TypeScript. You see, have you seen? Observed? Go to definition, it is a TypeScript file, TS. But you are using JavaScript. Later you will learn how to use TypeScript directly. You will see that. Along with JavaScript, you will see TypeScript also. But this is the basic point. So all events are synthetic events in React. They map to which events? Browser events. That means how they look like actually. So virtual DOM use synthetic event, and usually this is the virtual DOM and this is the DOM. This is the browser event. So how it actually looks like? Actually, it's nothing but just rough reference I am giving. Virtual DOM event will be like on click, right? On click. And here DOM will be on click. So on change. Here will be like on change. That means you will find here everything will be like camel case, like this, on submit. So we have on submit like this. All others are similar actually. Just I am showing the difference. That means usually the actual DOM event is on click. Usually you write in lowercase. And if anyone asked you in interview what is difference between these two, that that means usually this is a very common question, even experienced level people, because many times people know about event but they don't know that it is from a synthetic event library, because there is no necessity of knowing it. They just need to know on click is insert click, right? If you watch any regular React videos. When they explain about any event, they will say on click is an event, but nobody says on click is an synthetic event. There is no necessity because developer should know that it is an event for a functionality. But at experience level, you should know what it is derived from, how it is created, because at some situations, um, means that will not come regularly, but in some situations we can create our own events, like on check, on click, on change. We can create our own events. You may ask, like, why do we create our own events? Is what is the necessity? Because in component based technology, every component can have its own events. Every component can have its own events. That means what you done, actually, you designed a screen. In this screen, suppose this is a home. In this home, you created, for example, there is another component. This is a grid component. Suppose this is a grid component. You want to use this grid component in home. That means what happens? You can access it and you can put it here. Now, what happens? Home is having some data. This data you will pass into the grid. Now, what this grid have to do? It should able to sort, filter, search on that particular data. That means this grid needs some events. That grid needs events. So this is a custom element. You created your own element. Then that element should have some event. That means this element can have some event. That means you can create events. So how to create events? If you can derive synthetic event, you can create your own event. That means that you will see in TypeScript. I will show you how, because this library is built in TypeScript. In order to create your own event and use it, first what you have to do, you have to import the synthetic events, extend synthetic event. Have you seen mouse event? Mouse event is extending which one? Synthetic event. You also create a class that extends synthetic event, that becomes your own event. That means what you can do, you can create, suppose here, so class that is like my click, something like this, extends, it extends which one? Synthetic event. Synthetic event. Now what is my click? What is my click type? Event type. It is an event type. That means you can create your own events and it implements this. I will show you while learning class components, how the classes are extended and all, right? Usually we can create our own events also. For that you need that synthetic event library. Okay, so this is another point you should know, how React uses the events. Next, another option you need to know about, uh, event propagation. I hope this you learned in general JavaScript also. Event propagation and prevent default. These are general things you learned in JavaScript also, because in JavaScript same concept will be, you will face the same issue. So prevent default and propagations. What is this event propagation and prevent default like concept here? Is usually what is prevent default? Actually, prevent default is nothing but some elements in JavaScript have, some elements in HTML have default events. That means we have generic elements. Some elements in HTML are generic elements. Generic elements means those elements have a functionality. Even you don't write the functionality, they have a functionality. Then you have to stop that functionality and define your own functionality. So that means that's a general thing. You might have come across with this concept even in general JavaScript. For example, we are designing a form. Okay. In this form, we have name. So input type is equal to text. And we have a button. So submit. Actually, this button type is submit. By default, it is submit type. Even you don't define the type. Now, if a form is having a submit button, by default, it have the ability to submit the form. You don't need to write any functionality. You see, there is no event written. But observe carefully what is happening here. I entered some details. I click on submit. Then it is submitting the data here. That means it is having by default some functionality. I don't want that. That means it is having a name like some username. And you see, I entered here some name and submit. It is submitting that here. I don't want this to happen. That means by default, there is some functionality for a submit button. And I don't want that functionality. Then how we can stop? Then what we have to do? How submit button submits? It will use on submit. Am I right? On submit, we will write a function handle submit. And we will write a functionality here. So actually, directly you can define how to write a function. We have to write a function, and what this function have to take event argument, prevent argument e dot prevent default. We have to just use it. That means what will happen now here? It automatically configures a functionality and it will prevent the default functionality. You see here, I'm entering some name and submit, it's not doing anything. You can add your own functionality. That means I will put semicolon. So I will keep an alert. I'll say submit clicked. That means we are stopping the default functionality and we are writing our own functionality. That means here what happens now, I entered some name and submit, it will do your work. But it will not do the default posting work because form have some default event. We can prevent it. I am writing like this. You can write like a separate function, right? You can write a function handle submit e dot prevent default. You can access event argument and default. I just written inline everything. Inline, you can directly configure them here. So what is this prevent default and why we need this? Because some elements have some default functionality and which we don't want to happen. Then we can just use it using prevent default. So event propagation and prevent default. So actually what is prevent default? So prevent default is used to stop the default functionality configured for generic elements in a form is used to stop default functionality configured for generic elements in a form. So that is prevent default. Example I will give here event demo.jsx. This is an example for that, how you prevent default. And what is propagation? You know propagation also. Propagation means if a child element is clicked, triggered, the parent events also triggers. We have to stop the propagations. That means that is also general thing you learned in JavaScript. That is, suppose we have a div and this is having a class name margin 4, padding 4, and this is BG warning like this. This is parent, and here we have a button. So this is a button class btn dark, something like this. Okay. Now here we have so function container click. So here alert will say container click. So we have another function button click, and we will keep an alert button clicked. These are two messages we are giving. This is button, just button I am giving like this. And you see usually what happens when I click on parent, we should point it. Now this container is having on click. On click, it will point towards container click. Button is having on click. On click, it will point towards button click. Now what happens? I clicked on the container. I clicked on container, then it says container click. Okay, good. That's it. When I click on button, then it says button clicked. Okay, good. When I say okay, it says container clicked, but I haven't clicked the container. That means because this is a child event, this propagates the functionality to the parent. That means you clicked on child, it will simulate entire container, and container also have an event, it also fires up. But the button have to stop the propagation to others. It should not allow this propagation to them. Then what we have to do? So here we have to use an event argument E. Through event argument, we can use what it is? Stop propagation. We have to use stop propagation. What it is going to do now? So I click on the parent, so container clicked. I clicked on the button clicked. Okay. After that, the container not clicked. That means it will not allow to trigger the parent action. Parent action will be triggered only when it is clicked. That is propagation. That means usually the child elements propagates the event to the parent. We have to stop that. So stop propagation. So will not allow the child events to simulate and trigger the parent events. Will not allow the child events to simulate and trigger the parent events. That is stop propagation.
हम ना करवा रहे हैं, पूछ लो.
This is another example. So event demo.jsx.
अरे पैसा रखे रे, छोड़. देखे मत देख, 20 रुपया. छोड़े रे.
That is stop propagation. Right? That's an example for that. So these are all the basic things you should know about events. How the events are written, how the event arguments are passed, how the events prevent, default and stop propagation. Now we will see some examples with events. Mouse events, keyboard events, miscellaneous events, different. few examples on different events that we'll see tomorrow. Right, in tomorrow's session, we will learn some examples with some events. Every category one example I will give. Others are same like you done in your JavaScript and all. Once we know this, then we can move forward and learn more concept of developing some application, single page applications that we'll see in next session. Right. So tomorrow we'll continue.
पास से करता और अच्छा दिखता
क्या हुआ?
सर पे खोलो मेरे भागे पड़ेगा अरे
अरे